Hello and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, as always, Connor Bush, and with me, as always, is this other guy, Phil.
Yes.
Okay, good. Phil McKenzie. That's right. I'm honored to be joined today by Phil McKenzie. In fact, I don't know why I'm being so weird, Phil. I apologize. It's like I'm under some kind of emotional duress that I'm just deflecting with meaningless sarcasm. Maybe it's because I'm so excited about this card. It looks good.
Yeah, this has got to be the best card topped by a Derrick Lewis fight ever?
Probably. Yeah, I'm going to say that not really remembering any of the undercards Derrick Lewis was on top of.
Because actually I'm thinking about it, because he's actually topped a lot of cards.
Yeah, you just can't not have Derrick Lewis in the main event. They had to have him in Texas. Of course, we can mention up front the many asterisks attached to this piece of matchmaking, that Derrick Lewis is not deserving of an interim title. Nor should an interim title exist at all. The fact that this is an interim title fight seems a two-pronged, sort of move. Three-pronged, perhaps. They wanted to have Derrick Lewis in a main event in Houston. That much is clear. They want to set up Ciryl Gane for the real heavyweight title. I guess it's four prongs, because they also seemingly wanted to come up with a justification to not have Amanda Nunes in the main event when she was still on this card. Now she unfortunately contracted COVID. And also they want to say fuck you to Francis Ngannou for trying to hold out for a John Jones fight that would make him lots of money.
Well, and they want to say fuck you to John Jones too.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, you know what? I don't think I thought of that first, because they're not alone in that, to be honest. But financially, the man deserves money for fighting. All of that being said, all of the horrible, dark, gritty crap that's just like not even swept under the carpet in the UFC. It's just like the carpet is bulging. You can't walk on it. You're constantly tripping. The carpet is a mound underneath the carpet. But despite that, it's a pretty looking carpet. Derrick Lewis, Ciryl Gane, more interesting than most Derrick Lewis fights, if only because Ciryl Gane seems to have so much potential. Seems like the perfect fight to just go completely one way and then potentially the opposite. Co-main event is now Jose Aldo versus Pedro Munhoz, which is unbelievably enticing. That is a hell of a fight. Michael Chiesa versus Vicente Luque sounds awesome. Weird sort of style clash there. Kind of a new thing for Chiesa in this welterweight run. Looking forward to that. Tisha Torres, Angela Hill. Cool rematch. I enjoyed the first fight. Interesting test to see how much better Angela Hill has really gotten. And then the main card opener, Song Yadong, about whose name we will make zero jokes, and that's a promise.
None.
Is taking on Casey Kenny in another enticing style clash. The main card here is bananas, and it doesn't even stop at the main card. I just think that's probably all and possibly more than we're going to have time to discuss on this week's episode. So let's cut the shit, Phil, and get into the main event, which, frankly, shouldn't take us too long.
Yeah, I mean, you said this was sort of an interesting fight to break down, but in many ways it kind of isn't.
No, it's interesting in the way that, like, John Wick 3 is interesting. Like, you know what you're in for. You've seen it before. If you like John Wick, you're going to enjoy it. It's a Derrick Lewis fight. Right?
Yeah. I mean, so essentially the dynamic that we have to call out is the one that, Gane is going to be winning.
Yeah.
Every second of this fight.
More emphatically,
until
even
there might be one where he doesn't.
Yeah.
I think the only two things to pull out from that are how much has Derrick Lewis changed recently? Because we've called out him being, him trying to be better, trying to be, well, not just more quote unquote technical, but more actually technical, trying to be a better fighter. And just, and other than that, it's just, how likely is it that he clobbers Gane? Can Gane just keep him, on the end of his jab for 25 minutes?
Probably. And that's it for the first segment. We'll be back after this break to discuss Pedro Munhoz versus... No, I mean, that's it. It is that simple. In Derrick Lewis is perfectly designed for Ciryl Gane to, it's the Rosenstruik fight, but bigger. Derrick Lewis is just bigger and, is frankly a more proven, out of nowhere comeback finisher than Rosenstruik has ever been. But
and he also does have more range tools that he's willing to commit to.
That's true.
So he has, of which we have basically two, which are running blitzes.
Let's count them down. You got running blitz. You got flying kick.
Big ol' head kicks.
Number 2 with a bullet. Big old kick. Yeah, that's kind of it. But it is something. The kicks in particular might be interesting because Gane is going to spend a lot of time at that range. And has proven to be, as many great MMA kickers are, a little susceptible on his end to kicks. Junior Dos Santos landed some really powerful kicks on him. And I guess that's mostly it, actually. Right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that I think Dos Santos he's a relevant example here, because not only is he a person who is able to kick with Gane, but he's also really the last person that Lewis fought who really wanted to strike with him. I was thinking about this, how much have we seen from Derrick Lewis as a pure kickboxer?
It's true.
It's basically, if he's not thinking about defending takedowns, it's Dos Santos, and it is to some extent Blagoy Ivanov, and in both cases, particularly Blagoy Ivanov, I am shockingly loath to compare him to Ciryl Gane.
Although I do love Blagoy Ivanov.
Yeah.
Oop, we get a little audio from my end. We had a little audio from your end just before. The production quality keeps going up on this show. Yeah, it is an interesting question. Whether it happens suddenly or develops gradually, the turning point in a Derrick Lewis fight is more often than not, and really more often than not, when the opponent decides that it's too scary and they need to wrestle him. Which I guess is an interesting question here. Ciryl Gane has demonstrated a willingness to wrestle. Will he fall into that trap?
Oh man, that would rule.
Right? It's like Lewis
that would
is
be
like
one of the funnier outcomes. Is this. So far, ice cold clinical technician, just oh my god, I've got to take this giant fat guy down. Have to. It's too scary.
Because Lewis does have he has a Neil Magny effect on people where I think in part people want to wrestle. It's a double thing. You're afraid of his power, of course. Maybe you feel the gale force wind that goes past your face when he misses by an inch, and that goes some way to convince you to start wrestling. There's also the fact that it just seems like it should be really easy. Just like Neil Magny, you step into the clinch the first time, you're like, oh my god, this guy's like a willow branch. I can do whatever I want to him. And then you don't realize it's a frog in a pot kind of thing. You don't realize you're boiling until it's far too late. Derrick Lewis doesn't look like he should be difficult to take down.
Because he isn't.
He isn't really. I mean, he's better at stopping takedowns than you would think, to be fair. But
Yes.
mostly I think just because he's titanically strong. And yeah, so people destroy themselves doing that. It would be really funny, and there is an outside chance because Gane has clearly been introducing more and more wrestling to his game, which is a good idea to have it as a backstop, as a switch up, something to add more threat to all the feinting that he does. But there's also the fact that I don't know that even that would destroy Ciryl Gane the way it does most heavyweights, because he's truly unusual in that he doesn't get tired until like the fourth round. Like, he has unusually strong heavyweight stamina, Ciryl Gane.
Yeah. And, no, I mean, we called out Volkov as being someone who could potentially push a pace that Gane might be uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
Because he is pretty much the only person in the UFC heavyweight division apart from Miocic who could probably do that.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do it at all.
No.
He could not enforce that pace even in the slightest.
Yeah. Why was that?
So, because he was just being controlled the whole time.
Too many feints.
Not
too
necessarily
many jabs.
because, not in a like grappling sense, but Volkov couldn't land his jab. He couldn't step forward. I mean, I think this is another. So, I mean, and looking at the Volkov-Lewis fight, realize how much a defensively vulnerable, but nonetheless like rangy striker was able to just piece Lewis up.
Oh yeah.
And Gane has none of the problems that Volkov had that allowed Lewis back into that matchup.
Right.
He doesn't have the plodding foot speed. He doesn't have the shunky cagecraft. And to be honest, he doesn't have the finishing instincts.
No. But I also think he's got, and this is saying something because Volkov is a super high output fighter. He's got even better stamina than Volkov.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that probably, if you put them on a treadmill, they'd be about the same. But it's just that I think Gane is just he's just a much more controlled, composed fighter.
Yeah.
And I don't think that looks good for Derrick Lewis.
No.
Any sort of improvements that we've seen from him, I think, can probably be stripped away. His best striking performances have traditionally come when he has some kind of frame advantage. He looked profoundly uncomfortable being the shorter man against Volkov.
Yeah.
It was very fortunate to get away with a win out of that one.
Because he's got,
as hilarious as it was.
He's got no defense. When he counters or throws virtually anything, it's one and done. He's oversensitive to feints. I mean, watch the last 2 minutes or so of the first round against Curtis Blades.
Mm-hmm.
He's just getting jabbed and kicked.
Yeah, that was why I didn't want to be too mean to Lewis, because he might have been just, as it turned out, utterly correctly waiting for the takedown so that he could counter it.
And that's
but I mean,
thing.
even then, he was getting butchered.
He was. But that is the thing with Derrick Lewis, is that Derrick Lewis knows how Derrick Lewis fights go. This is the secret to his success, is that he can just sort of mentally hold it together and remain sharp and keyed in and dangerous no matter how terribly things are going. He knows how he wins. He has complete and utter faith in the notion that a single punch can secure him the fight at any moment, and usually late. when the opponent is getting careless because it's been so easy to beat him up. So yeah, I mean, it could happen. But Ciryl Gane, man, you give him space and time. If you're, what's he going to be waiting on for Gane to do? What's the mistake he's going to be waiting on for his one adjustment to work?
Yeah. Gane is the least mistake-prone heavyweight we've probably ever seen.
Yeah.
So at least thus far. I mean, that's obviously setting myself up to be
it only takes one.
Flipped. But, he's so far, he's been absolutely unwilling to step off the rails. I mean, and I don't think this is a Leon Edwards situation. Where he's going to be leaving a dangerous opponent in the fight. Again, at the risk of getting hoisted on my own petard, don't think that's going to happen. He just doesn't have Volkov's tendency to back away with his head in the air, or to, step forward and, how did Volkov get knocked out again? He didn't get Gustafsson, did he? He didn't throw a front kick. Oh, yes, he did. In the last 15 seconds of a fight that he was absolutely dominating. Or at least a step knee. I just don't think Gane would do that. I don't think there's... I think that this is one of those examples where he's just a bit of a nightmare matchup for Lewis.
We definitely, it's there are shades of gray here. You can have the Leon Edwards problem where it's hey, maybe you should get Nate Diaz out of here. But you can also have a fight like Derrick Lewis where it's we're on short time. He's coming on. And you're you know what? Just run circles around him, especially because even more so than against Nate Diaz, you can do that. Lewis is not going to put some smart combinations together. If you're late in a fight and you sense, as Volkov should have, that Lewis is really looking for it when he needs it more than ever, Gane does not have to try to step in and meet him. Gane is going to feint that big shot out of him and make it miss by a mile. Maybe then he hits Derrick Lewis from an angle. I just think, Derrick Lewis backing into the fence, trying to figure out just a hailstorm of feints and fakes, and meanwhile eating jabs and kicks to the legs and body. He's getting fucked up for a long portion of this fight. And I think this is one of the ones he can't come back from. I just think Gane is too consistent.
Yeah. I mean, like you said right at the beginning, it's the Rosenstruik fight. And in the case of that Rosenstruik fight, that was one where Gane was incentivized to go out and prove something, and he didn't. He just won.
Yep.
This is now one where if he wins, he's the interim heavyweight champion and he has a title shot. It is not guaranteed because this is the UFC, but it's as close to guaranteed as you get.
Yeah.
He has no incentive to risk anything. And I think, he's fundamentally just someone who's I think honestly, the problem with Leon Edwards is that unless he's really dominating someone in the grappling, he doesn't really have anywhere that he's safe.
No.
But because as you've mentioned, he's not a defensively sound fighter for his division. I'm not necessarily saying he's a worse striker than Ciryl Gane.
No.
But it's the fact that Ciryl Gane is a very safe fighter for his division. He is able to fight in his safe zone utterly consistently and, without getting himself into trouble. Leon Edwards consistently has to use his wrestling to bail him out, his wrestling and his clinch game to bail him out from his striking.
There is also this is a major difference to me. Ciryl Gane does deliver volume. It's just that 80% of that volume is bullshit. Mm-hmm. Leon Edwards doesn't do that enough. If Leon Edwards was as active with his feints as Ciryl Gane is, it would be a totally different story because he wouldn't be waiting. He would be prompting reactions and gathering information and setting up openings that even Leon Edwards probably couldn't resist taking now and then. Gane is really, really active and proactive even when he's being evasive, because he's a very, like, I don't know, a very tactically active fighter. He challenges you even when he's not actually hitting you. And that, I think, is the thing that really ruins Derrick Lewis here. I think it's the feints. He's not going to be able to time when his moment is to come off the fence, nor is he going to be able to see the shots coming. Gane may not be a huge finishing striker, but like, would you be shocked if a bunch of front kicks to the body just put Derrick Lewis in a terrible position? Yeah, maybe he makes it out of the round, but how discouraging is it to Derrick Lewis when you hurt him and then don't stumble into a stupid exchange? He can't like that. That's how he wins.
Yep. Yeah, the Travis Brown.
Yeah.
KO, or indeed, most of the Volkov exchanges. And we've seen that Lewis can be lulled into terrible, terrible fights for a really long amount of time against Gane.
That's the difference, I guess.
He fairly clearly won that, but
sure. But that's the difference, I guess, is that Gane is going to be safe, like Leon Edwards thinks he is, but he will be active and keep the pressure on. So, if you're holding on to the initiative, it's a hell of a lot less risky to let a guy stick around if he's doing what you want him to do. Ciryl Gane, all day. Your new stupid interim heavyweight champion. But hey, Gane versus Ngannou. I'll watch that.
For it.
Okay. Let's take a break. We still somehow managed to spend 20 minutes breaking down this, what we admitted up front was an incredibly simple one fight or the other kind of matchup. When we come back, a far more complicated fight between Jose Aldo and Pedro Munhoz, and then all the others that I mentioned as well. As many as we can fit, coming up after this. Do you think we can fit Yadong, Phil?
If we really try and squeeze it in, yeah.
It'll be a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are coming to the true main event, in my opinion, of UFC 265. Former featherweight champion, former thrilling bantamweight title challenger, Jose Aldo, one of the greatest of all time, is taking on Pedro Munhoz in a real crossroads battle to determine, can he still win what I think, 5 years ago I would have considered an intensely winnable fight. I don't know. 5 years ago it would have been a 5-rounder. I think the 3 rounds is probably beneficial for Aldo here. But yeah, what do you make of it? Pedro Munhoz, nonstop pressure, violent, incredibly durable. Jose Aldo, suicidally dangerous, but also incredibly defensively responsible in a way that almost no Munhoz opponent other than Jimmy Rivera really is. And I think in some ways, for this particular matchup, a stronger defensive fighter than Jimmy Rivera. What I'm alluding to, Phil, is calf kicks. I think Jose Aldo actually knows how to deal with calf kicks. So,
yeah, we've famously seen, who was it? Someone tried throwing calf kicks against him, pretty early on in his UFC run, and he was just like, no, this is stupid.
I think
it just didn't work on him at all.
I think Marlon may have tried.
Yeah. Am I thinking that's early? Jesus. But yeah. Because that was really the difference maker in Munhoz Rivera.
Yep.
I think, once again, this one has a dynamic and a story to it that everyone has keyed in on, and many people are dreading.
Sure.
Which is that people are expecting Aldo to clean up on him on rounds 1 and 2, and get pretty tired in round 3. If you were watching that Chito Vera fight, you would have been very pleased by how Aldo was looking in rounds 1 and 2, and that he was largely piecing Vera up. And, on the one hand, was, as we mentioned at the time, a smart veteran strategy to, take down Chito Vera in the 3rd round.
Yep.
It would not be a smart veteran strategy to attempt to take down Pedro Munhoz in the last round.
Probably wouldn't even work. Munhoz is a phenomenal wrestler.
That's the thing. It would work, as it typically does when people try to wrestle Pedro Munhoz. You can wrestle him if he wants you to.
Yeah. And even then,
if the takedown is in fact a guillotine, which he thinks is going to work,
yeah,
then the takedown will be successful. Other than that, he has remarkable takedown defense.
And also remarkable scrambling. Like, even if Pedro Munhoz does accept the takedown because he thinks there's a choke in it, what is the longest anyone has ever controlled Munhoz on the ground?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's like no time at all. He gets up instantly if the guillotine doesn't materialize. He did that against Frankie Edgar. He did it the one time that Jimmy Rivera took him down in their rematch. I can't recall a single time Munhoz has been held down. He's just
maybe like Asunciao in his first fight in the UFC, but even then, I just mostly remember him trailing Rafael around the cage eating counters.
Yeah, getting his own leg chewed up. Fight metric credits Asunciao with 2 minutes of control in that fight on 3 takedowns.
Yeah, ain't much.
Not much. Some of that may have been clinch control as well, as far as we know. I don't have the fight playing in front of me. The point is, at the very best, trying to take Munhoz down will be taxing. And probably not consistently successful. And possibly suicidally dangerous. Not that I would expect Jose Aldo to get submitted, but hey. There's a first time for everything, and it wouldn't technically even be the first time. I think Aldo's first MMA loss was an armbar. So, as you said, the dynamic is right there. Munhoz is going to come on. He is going to pressure. We saw that work tremendously well in that rematch against Pedro Munhoz. How well does it work against
Rivera?
Oh, sorry. Against Pedro Munhoz versus Pedro Munhoz. What's different about Jose Aldo that might change the dynamic? I have one thing, other than an ability to check and or evade low kicks. Aldo is way better at standing his ground, which I think was a major part of Rivera's, because it took, Rivera got his leg chewed up. But the solution to that he should have hit on right away, like in round 2, was to come forward. Something that he did in the last minute of the fight with tremendous success. Because Pedro Munhoz is sort of defensively a poor man's Petr Yan. In that he has a high guard. And that's mostly it. I guess he's a little more willing to take a backward step, but even that, he made some improvements to his boxing. His jab got a lot better. But like when Rivera stepped forward and threw a combination, he was basically able to hit whatever he wanted with at least one of those punches clean.
Yeah. It's not necessarily even just it's not even just like the willingness to come forward. It's also, Aldo's generally excellent ability not to get backed into the cage.
Right.
I mean, because that's another thing about that Peter Yan fight, is that Peter Yan is pretty fantastic at backing people up. And it took him a long time to back Jose Aldo into the cage.
Yes, it did.
And, by then, Aldo was, fairly gassed out. He does not give up space in the cage as much as, like Jimmy Rivera does, who, fought Yan himself with his back to the cage a lot of the time, which, ended up being the thing which lost him that fight, because he got herded into shots.
Yeah. Aldo, very, very good point. Better at standing his ground in both a literal and functional sense. It's not that he's always standing right in front of you, although he does love to do that. He's got the actual evasive footwork to put himself back in the center. Tight pivots. Like there were a lot of moments where Yan got him near the fence in the early going, and Aldo was there for 2 seconds before it was back to being an open space fight. He has an awareness of where he is in the cage and a myriad of ways of putting himself back in a better position. So that's big, I think. How about?
Yeah, I mean, this is another one where I think that Munhoz needs to show, I think, round-winning weapons in a way which he potentially hasn't before. Because I think there's obviously a case for him just exhausting Aldo as Aldo's gas tank shortens over the years. He's gone from being like 4 rounds to 3 rounds to 2 rounds kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's really operating at peak efficiency. And this is a combination, I think, of him getting older and the generalized pace of MMA just getting much, much, much higher.
Yep.
Pretty much every historical champion has had to raise their pace who has still been in the UFC.
Yep.
From what they used to like to throw to what they are forced to throw nowadays. So, there's that case. But I think, if we look at the people who have troubled Aldo or won rounds, or tactics which have won rounds, if you think of like the Volkanovski approach, this doesn't seem hugely replicable for Pedro Munhoz. Although I think he did come out with a great game plan against Rivera in their match. So I don't want to necessarily write him off as just like a big, violent lunkhead. But, he needs, if he wants to, Aldo is the best at attacking committed shots because Aldo comes back with committed shots. Aldo is perhaps less good at people who throw things away. Munhoz does not throw things away.
Yeah.
He's developed the jab and he has developed the low kick, but he has developed them in honest warrior ways. He has a really hard, really straight, like very, very nice jab. And he has a really hard low kick, and he's learned how to throw it a few ways. But one thing he hasn't done is to like feint and build up bullshit volume leads like Volkanovski could, or to just feint and use non-committal strikes to pull out defensive reactions like Aldo could.
Yes,
like Holloway could.
I'm very glad you pointed that out. I was thinking the same thing myself watching Rivera. Munhoz Rivera too, that he got really one note once the low kick started working. Like in the way that, say, and this is perhaps why he had as much trouble with an aged Frankie Edgar as he did, in much the same way that Gray Maynard got one note against Frankie Edgar. Like famously, Gray Maynard got that right uppercut to work. And then he just started throwing it at every single opportunity, and it stopped working. Munhoz didn't really have a single weapon that stuck against Frankie Edgar, and I think that's because in a not very subtle, you can call it honest, I suppose, if you're being really complimentary. In an honest, straightforward way, when he sees something working, he will put much of his mental focus into continuing to find that weapon. And as you said, there aren't a lot of layers to precede these things. Like, I've been watching some Andre Ward fights lately, so I have a very strong contrast in my head. Andre Ward will, like, certain fighters, this is a little more like Petr Yan even, like, Petr Yan will put out 2 fakes as like the first 2 moves of his advance into the pocket to land the last shot. He will throw like a whole combination of non-existent strikes in order to set up a good, powerful shot. That's not something Munhoz really does. And
Yan is an extremely gradated fighter who goes all the way up from bullshit. He will gradate from bullshit up to massive swings.
Yes. And
which is good.
It's great. And Munhoz is a lot more operating in single layers. So you'll hear me say, dear listener, on the Vivisection this week, which we recorded in advance, that Aldo has struggled with low kicks in the past. Like Frankie Edgar, the aforementioned, landed tons of low kicks on Jose Aldo. It's just that they were like 20% as powerful as the ones Aldo landed in turn. But they were all set up. Frankie Edgar will absolutely throw layers out there to disguise his low kicks, and the vast majority of the ones he found were, in fact, as Aldo was stepping back or turning away from a punching advance. If you're just going to throw the same weapon, as we saw in whatever the hell fight that was that we can't think of now, Aldo can deal with that. He has tremendous first layer defense. Okay, so here's a point of concern. There's also, by the way, I was going to mention this before, body shots. Obviously body shots. Finding ways around that pretty basic Munhoz defense. One of the best ways I can imagine to deal with Pedro Munhoz is to hit him in the body really, really hard.
Oh, it was Renato Moicano.
Moicano, okay. Who tried a couple early, and Aldo just, like, after eating one, easily started picking them off.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Aldo, as a great body puncher, Munhoz's defense is in form somewhat similar to Petr Yan's in that they both like a double forearm high guard, and he landed a shitload of killer body shots on Petr Yan. Munhoz is also famously durable. What do you do to people you can't knock out? What do you do to the Jeremy Stevens of the world that are going to be able to take your headshots? You hit them in the body, especially when they're essentially begging you to do it by just holding their arms up high over their head. So that's another thing that I think stands in Aldo's favor. What doesn't stand in Aldo's favor? We've mentioned the pace. I'm also concerned that I don't think Aldo is all that good at counterpunching anymore.
Interesting.
At the very least, he struggled with it against Yan. And I think to a degree struggled with it against Cheeto. I don't think the link between his defense and his offense is as good as it used to be. I don't know if it's some trauma from the Max Holloway fight where he's like, I have to keep putting together defensive moves because this combination is never going to end. I have to make sure I make everything miss before I come back. But he feels a little more like he's going to make you miss, and then once you reset, then he might make you pay. So if Munhoz does go full meathead and trust in his ability to survive what Aldo throws back at him, that could honestly, in my mind, be the best way to win this fight for him. Just straight up overwhelm Jose Aldo with non-stop violence, trusting that you can outlast him and take what he... Because obviously the problem there, we know, Aldo is going to respond. That is, in his favor, compared to someone like Jimmy Rivera. He's not going to go for self-preservation. For Aldo, self-preservation is offense. So when shit is going wrong, he is going to suicide himself into exchanges, which could work for him. Something that Jimmy Rivera certainly could have used more of. But it could also, if Munhoz can take it, obviously just lead to Aldo crumbling in the later rounds. So, I don't know. I don't think he's quite as good at coming back if the opponent just continues tacking strikes together.
Yeah, that's a fair take, I think.
Then again, do you think there's any... Do you have any feeling that Munhoz is maybe not as good at putting things together as he used to be, since he's worked on his jab and seems to have a slightly more interest in like defensive range boxing? I'm less concerned about it since the Rivera rematch, but certainly in the Frankie Edgar fight, that was not really.
Yeah, the Edgar fight, it was definitely one where you found yourself thinking, if you just tried to buzzsaw this guy, I'm pretty sure you could.
Yeah, it's old Frankie Edgar, like just go in there and hit him with 1,000 things.
But yeah, I think the Rivera fight showed the sort of benefits of that approach.
Yeah, but do you?
But I think it's going to be a different matchup than that. I think because Aldo is going to, I think, give Munhoz exchanges that he doesn't particularly like.
Yeah.
That he can. No, I think he enjoyed having. He needs some level of like success to be having his exchanges, and at least Edgar was backed up into the cage, even if he was consistently coming out at Munhoz with combinations.
Yeah.
In terms of that, do you think there's a reason why he didn't try and low kick Edgar quite so much as he did Rivera? I mean, I know Edgar actually is a real hair trigger like low kick counterer.
I think that
probably
was it.
He trained it for Aldo. But
yeah,
do you think that's pretty much it?
I think that was it. It's just easier to counter Munhoz. Edgar had a lot of success just dashing in with those little like 1-2, 1-2 straight down the pike sort of counters. And yeah, it's just he was able to do that consistently because Munhoz doesn't set them up as well. Nor is he as surprisingly quick and devastating with them when Aldo does, when he does choose to just throw them naked. So yeah, I mean he did, cause like he didn't, in round 2, I think, of Munhoz Edgar, he landed quite a few. And then Edgar just took the cue and started answering them, and they kind of disappeared, from Munhoz's attack after that. Rivera never found an answer, so Munhoz got to tee off with them over and over and over. Aldo seems better designed to come up with either offensive or defensive answers to those kicks. Yeah.
So who are you picking?
I'm picking Aldo.
I'm picking Pedro Munhoz.
Are you? Make a case, goddammit. We've been talking about how all the answers Aldo has for this problem the whole time. Why?
He's just been fighting dynamic, super dangerous fighters for too long, and he's been at some point it just has to stop working.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was historically super comfortable, the only danger to Aldo was in round 3 or later, and I would be more comfortable with that. But remember, he got almost instantly finished by Moraes.
You're right.
And he got put on his ass by Peter Yan almost instantaneously as well.
He got badly hurt with a body shot on the ground by Yan as well.
Mm-hmm.
In the first round, yeah.
So, I mean, we're just talking someone who, like, I don't necessarily trust him to start quickly. I certainly don't trust him to end well.
Yeah.
And he's just up against I don't necessarily say he's up against a not young, but insanely durable 3-dimensional threat. We've seen a lot of fighters just start. I mean, he's a much better low kick counterer than anyone Munhoz has fought, but we've seen how badly low kicks in general can break down aging fighters.
Sure.
Like, if Munhoz just manages to find, if Aldo's like, I want to scare this guy off, and he just comes in, and Munhoz just manages to like trade with a low kick or something at the right point, I trust it not to compromise Aldo.
Yeah, Aldo is definitely reaching that point where you're like, just whole body durability seems to be diminishing.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no technical reason for me to do it. It's just that at some point this has to stop working. The Moraes and Jan fights were great fights, but they were also, like I said, super close to just being the old guy got wiped out instantly fights.
Sure.
So they were super close to being like Edgar Ortega or Edgar Chan Sung Jung.
Yeah.
And I can't pick Aldo to keep doing that.
Yeah.
For him not to get finished in either round 3 or round 1.
And Munhoz is not exactly a slow starter.
Oh.
In fact, I mean, this may have had something to do with the fact that it was a rematch. He clearly had some ideas based on their first fight, but against Rivera, he didn't even respect the counters that were landing against his low kicks. He was so determined to get those in. He ate a huge left hook from Rivera on a low kick counter in the first 30 seconds. Did not stop him pursuing that opening. Yeah, and that is the thing, is that Munhoz, more than any opponent that Aldo has beaten in this recent run, this post-championship run, can just afford to take shots.
I mean, he's Cheeto obviously can also do that, but Munhoz is also Aldo has answers for them, but it's just the fact that Munhoz is a way more coherent offensive threat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if Aldo gets hurt early, I won't even say he's out of the fight. Once again, I think he probably won round 2 and quite possibly round 3 against Petr Yan after that horrible start. So I don't even think he's out of it even then, because the thing we know about Jose Aldo, is that he is going to come up with answers, and his answers will be savage. And I think he has so many weapons that are in fact perfectly designed to get around the limited defense of Petr Yan. He's got the body shots. He landed a ton of those good step-in knees on Yan as well. Just right up the middle as he ducked down into his guard. He has his own kicking game. He can out-jab Munhoz. So I think there are a lot of ways for Aldo to get into this, even if he does lose the first round. But that's a very, very tricky position against a guy who doesn't get tired and has never been knocked out.
Yeah, he has to win the second round, but then he has to win the third one as well.
Right. And the third one against Yan was kind of split down the middle.
Yeah.
He probably had the best single moment of the round, best onslaught, but then the last minute, Yan was all over him. So we'll see. It's an incredibly enticing matchup. There's unlike the Lewis Gane, there's a million different ways you could see this one playing out. All of them violent, all of them back and forth. But I trust in the craft and the experience of Jose Aldo. I just think there's too many ways around Pedro Munhoz, and Jimmy Rivera proved himself after 2 rounds of getting torn apart, 2.5 rounds of getting torn apart. He was still able to find those ways around Munhoz's defense down to the last minute. So all it takes is a little more determination and consistency, I think, to turn those moments into round-winning moments. We'll see. I'm honestly, I'm just sadness edging. Yeah, that's fine. I understand that. I'm probably setting myself up for the worst heartbreak I've ever experienced by not sadness edging. But you know what? These are the risks we take. What I'm saying is that I'm actually as brave as Jose Aldo. When we come back from this break, oh God, how do I recover from that stupid line? What else is on this card? Phil, I'm struggling to
Chiesa Luque.
Oh yeah. Chiesa Luque.
Dong.
Hill Torres. All of that or most of it after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're not taking any time between the segments of this episode. The fights are just too compelling. And that leads us directly into third fight from the top on this UFC 265 main card, welterweight battle between Michael Chiesa and Vicente Luque. Chiesa has, I think, I'm speaking of my own expectations here, drastically overperformed as a welterweight so far.
Oh yeah.
He's done so well in this division, and some of those have been just, particularly that win over RDA. But on more than one occasion, I have been stunned by how intelligent his performance seems to be. Not least of all because he is famously a sick jitsu fighter. He's just made really good decisions. I also wonder if this is the moment where the train stops. Because none of these guys have been like Vicente Luque in the slightest. The most comparable to that would be RDA, and that's RDA 5 years ago on a good night. What I mean by that is, Luque is by far the hardest puncher Chiesa will have faced at welterweight, the best and most consistent, most relentless pressure fighter. And he's just never dealt with something like that. I mean, he has in previous fights. Some of them he lost. Recall that it was only 3 years ago. Chiesa was finished by Anthony Pettis, who just kind of punched him up and then also outgrappled him, surprisingly. But what do you make of it, Phil?
This is a real puzzler. Chiesa, as you mentioned, I have really come around on Michael Chiesa. Oh, yeah. I actually really like him as a fighter.
He's also a very likable guy compared to the other jiu-jitsu people. He's very charming.
Yeah, he seems super charming, but like that RDA fight, you cannot front on it at all.
Nope.
He won. You could say that RDA is perhaps more deteriorated than he was when he fought them, but he won far more clearly than, say, either Colby Covington or Leon Edwards did.
Oh, yeah.
It was a total shutout.
Way more clearly than Covington, no doubt.
And in that fight kind of showed that he could have a coherent game plan that used elements that we hadn't necessarily seen from him before. There was a lot of baiting people baiting RDA into counter double legs and just putting him up against the cage, making him swing, and then attacking him in a way that Covington sort of tried to do, but did far less effectively.
Yeah, even just the fact that he was hitting so many shot takedowns was kind of something we hadn't seen from Chiesa before. He is, to this day, I think, at his best as a suffocating, sticky, tangly sort of clinch wrestler. But he showed a new dimensions to his wrestling game against RDA when it was really important that he show those dimensions.
Yeah. So, I mean, the real question here is, how good has Vicente Luque's defensive wrestling gotten?
Sure.
That's the key question, because it's not necessarily how is it, because it was pretty crap when he first started in the UFC. He was a real classic, I'm going to knock you out on the feet or submit you if it goes to the ground kind of guy. And the first few experiences of him getting out wrestled seemed to be unpleasant for him. Notably when he came right out of the Tough House and he lost to, as far as I can recall, one of the more evil members of Team Evil, Michael Graves, now thankfully no longer in the UFC. and maybe in jail. I can't remember. But that was pretty much just him getting soundly out-wrestled to was it a decision win or was it a TKO?
Decision loss, 7 takedowns according to Fight Metric.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Since then, there's the Leon Edwards fight, where again, Luque got fairly consistently controlled. Mm-hmm. And then there's a whole raft of people who can't wrestle.
Yeah.
And then Tyron Woodley. So the big question is, and I thought that for what it was worth, Luque's defensive wrestling looked good against Woodley.
Mm-hmm.
That Woodley clearly came in, knowing that Luque's historically been out-wrestlable, and couldn't really get anything done. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much this was due to Luque just utterly prioritizing the sprawl and Woodley being incredibly faded, though.
Yeah, you have to take that into consideration.
Woodley also, punched Luque up a lot because I suspect Luque was just looking for the takedown.
Mm-hmm. So, thoughts on that? I mean, how much of it do you think? I think it has to be considered that Woodley was panicking the entire time he was in that fight. Was at the very least panicking in a new and better way than we had seen largely in the past. But yeah, if Chiesa comes in here looking for the shot takedowns the way he did against RDA, there is reason to think that at the very least as strong entries, those will work. Back in that Leon Edwards fight, Edwards shot on him and turned those into clinches. Double underhook, body lock style clinches, which, as we said, is really Chiesa's still his bread and butter as a wrestler. They also happened with Luque against the cage. And that's another question. Would Chiesa have gotten those takedowns on RDA if RDA wasn't so counterintuitively allergic to pressure? RDA is one of the most clearly defined either-or pressure fighters ever. He's either pressuring you to pieces, or he is backing up against every attempt you make to pressure him. Straight up often, right into the fence, and then everything falls apart for him. We know that. That was the read Chiesa made. Excellent read. He executed on that read exceptionally well. Can he back Luque up? Because if he can't, that's bad. Neil Magny was tuning my man up. Basically every moment it was on the feet after the first couple rounds, and it was only because Neil Magny believes his own hype that he himself turned into a typical Neil Magny opponent and continually engaged Chiesa in a clinch that he couldn't win. That's why he lost, really.
I mean, he doesn't have any ability to stop people engaging in the clinch, really.
Right. True. But
he's a large man, but a slow one.
Yes, but he also did just keep trying to wrestle Chiesa. He couldn't. Magny's he's like a quiet ego fighter. He doesn't want, if you out-wrestle him at all, I think he really wants to prove that he can do it back.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think he's I just think he's a guy where he's just this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're just I don't think he does it with a sense of ego. He's just he's a bit of a sparring fighter who just lets the fight be the
you're
fight.
Probably right. Yeah. Just takes the fight you give him. Luque is less than any other point in his career not that guy. He only does one fight now. And it's relentless pressure and combination punching. He does, however, enter the clinch. But he's also good at it. Offensively in a different way than anyone else. I can still recall when Joe Lozon fucked Chiesa up in the clinch. Mm-hmm. Elbows and short shots. That's not a great sign.
Yeah, but I feel like Chiesa is a genuinely he genuinely is a much better fighter at welterweight. I have to, this was our problem in the RDA fight, because we were like, oh yeah, he's been fucked up in the clinch. He clearly can't deal with low kicks at all. RDA is just gonna slaughter him. He got out wrestled by Anthony Pettis. I mean, not out wrestled, but out grappled by Anthony Pettis.
True.
How could this man, taking these three elements into account, have anything for RDA? And then he came out and you're just like, oh, he's actually a pretty quick welterweight on his feet, and he's like 9 feet tall.
Yeah.
And clearly weighs 210 pounds now.
Yeah.
And he's been clearly working on his wrestling like a lot.
Yeah. He's a Hulk at welterweight, for sure.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's increasingly hard for me to deny how well Chiesa has been performing, and but like I said, that is the most comprehensive trouncing of RDA since Usman. I mean, since Usman. That's the best anyone has done apart from Usman, I think.
Yeah.
And Luque is still like, one of the things about Chiesa as well is that he is a I would never call him a good striker, but he's a very and here's the sick jitsu thing, he's a very confident and aggressive one.
Yeah.
And Luque can absolutely get hit by people like that. His fight against Brian Barberena and his rematch against Nico Price, neither of these guys are good strikers in any way, shape, or form, but they had ideas for how to get around Luque's guard, and they were just gonna they weren't gonna just throw into his guard and then get, catch and pitch countered. They were gonna actually keep punching and trying to damage him before something came back. Worked super well. Luque, like many high guard proponents, can still be made to put the earmuffs on and back straight up if you just throw combinations at him.
Yeah. That's the entry for the shot too. That's how Leon Edwards.
Exactly. That's both the entry for the shot and it's the way to get the cage for Chiesa.
Yeah.
I kind of think he can do that. Like I said, I've really turned around on Chiesa. I think he's a smart fighter. He fits this weight class. And he's and one of the things is, you look at all those fights. Actually, though, this is a somewhat interesting dynamic to it. I don't necessarily think it's going to play into this one, but his losses always tended to be submissions, because he would Charles Oliveira it, and that he would be so convinced that he was the grappler in the matchup that he would put himself into terrible situations without necessarily realizing it and would get tapped out.
Well,
that was really a lot more of Luque's game back in the day.
Well, that's the thing, right?
It'd be really interesting to see if it's still there.
That's the thing. We haven't seen it because he hasn't been fighting many wrestlers. But he was, like a front headlock counter wrestler type of submission grappler, where he would hit you with insane
choke guy.
Yeah, exactly. Hit you with crazy power punches, and then you would desperately shoot, and then he would catch your neck. That is still a danger. Chiesa is, I think, less so than ever, actually, insanely confident about his ability to out-wrestle people. I think he will absolutely still dive into a guillotine or a Darce choke. Or, at the very least, he will dive into a takedown with the kind of confidence that can get you submitted by such a front headlock choke.
That's also one of the ways that I can see Luque finishing Chiesa, because I'm not sure if I can see him finishing Chiesa with strikes, because that's the other thing about, the other thing about, the fact that Chiesa got submitted a few times, got knocked out by anyone. That was clearly when he was outrageous amounts of weight.
That's true.
I think he's got an incredible beard.
And a good chin.
Both senses of the word.
Yeah.
So the Lozon thing was a cut.
Yep.
I think he's disgustingly durable.
I agree. Are any of these people remotely as powerful as Vicente Luque on Chiesa's record? Anthony Pettis,
but like I said, he was clearly cutting so much weight that I'm willing to like concede that he has. I'm willing to like gamble on him having just a virtually unbreakable chin at welterweight.
Yeah, I get the gamble, but it is a gamble. That must be acknowledged. Anthony Pettis dropped him, I think, more than once. And again, yes, I agree. The weight cut could absolutely have something to do with that. But Vicente Luque is not the dude to test your chin against.
No.
If it's going to come down to that, I'm going to bank on Luque here. I think he's going to get to pressure Chiesa. I think Magny, of all people, had far too easy a time of pressuring Chiesa. I think RDA is in a weird way, like, not to retcon, which is what I'm doing, but retrospectively, RDA was an ideal candidate for Chiesa to make that sort of approach shine. I think Luque is far more insistent about pressuring, more than ever before, in fact. He has just leaned harder and harder into that style, and it keeps working. You know, I just think Chiesa is too hittable. I think if the early rounds go how I'm expecting, then Chiesa is not going to be setting up those surprisingly powerful quick shots the way he did against RDA, but doing them as a reaction to what's happening to him. And if that's the case, then you're in Darce choke territory. If Luque is prompting your takedowns with his initiative, his power striking, then you are setting yourself up really for a surprise submission. But I also would not be surprised if Luque did badly hurt Chiesa and either knock him out or finish him on the ground after that happens. I'm not picking that. I expect actually we'll probably see a crazy 3-round fight here, but I'm gonna go with Luque. I need to. I also like Chiesa as a welterweight. I've been really impressed. I like him as a guy. Seems cool, but this is one where I feel like I need to see it before I will pick him to beat this very different kind of opponent.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, let's pick either Torres Hill or Yadong Kenny. I think Yadong Kenny is, we haven't seen it before. There's more of a chance that Tisha Torres just kind of does what she did before to Angela Hill. So why don't we talk about the main card opener as quickly as we can? Song Yadong, should have, his last fight should be a big wake-up call. Not sure he's gonna hear the alarm, as it were. That's a big question to me because, like, his fight with Cody Stamann should have been a wake-up call. I don't know that he made any dramatic changes. He's like a super good athlete who's never had to make big adjustments. He's just sort of slowly gotten more experienced and therefore better. But he is now at Team Alpha Male, who are not exactly celebrated for their ability to cultivate fighting styles and expand them and deepen them over time. So it's a big question if he will have addressed some of the problems that have reared their heads in both his last fight and that one with Cody Stamann. And I think Casey Kenny might be able to poke at a few of those holes. He's a high-paced fighter. He's got better than decent. I mean, by bantamweight standards, he's got pretty good lateral movement and evasive footwork. He is an increasingly confident combination striker and a competent reactive takedown artist. So I think there are a lot of ins here for Casey Kenny, and the big question is, does he just get nuked by one of the better athletes he's ever fought? What do you think?
Yeah, that's the big question because Yadong is like pretty devastating. One of those people where you can't really rely, sort of as you're alluding to with Luque. It's one of these guys where you can't rely on historical toughness.
Yeah.
Like, Alejandro Perez, I don't think he'd ever been knocked out, had he? Before Yadong just flatlined him?
I don't know.
I think maybe he had a long time ago. Oh yeah, he'd been finished by Masio Fullen in 2011. Probably an exhaustion TKO or something like that. But first round. Definitely nothing like that in the UFC.
Yeah.
But other than that, honestly, Casey Kenny seems like the he seems like a version of the Stamen matchup where, like, he just seems like a harder version of the Stamen matchup.
Yeah, an aggressive, high output Cody
He's
Stamen.
higher pace. Mm-hmm. He's a less effective wrestler, but clearly I think that's probably like one of the best parts of Yadong's game is just he's like a really natural, like, takedown defender and clinch fighter. But Kenny just fights at a way higher pace and with much more aggression.
Yeah, I think Kenny's style of wrestling will always it will never be as dominant against a guy like Song Yadong as Stamen's was. Like I recall Casey Kenny's UFC debut against Ray Borg. He's going to allow a scrambler to scramble. That was the problem that Yadong had with Stamen, is that, you know, like, he's one of those fighters. He's a tremendous athlete. He doesn't accept the takedown easily, but once you get past, once you settle him down, and start slow cooking him a little bit, he doesn't actually have a lot of bright ideas as to how to escape that position. I don't think Casey Kenny is typically that much of a control wrestler. He wants to invite transitions so he can advance his position. And that seems like enough to allow Yadong out, sooner or later from every takedown attempt. But the openings will be there, and they will be combined with way more volume than Cody Stamen has ever brought to the table. Ever. Casey Kenny has proven now, I guess, like the last 3 fights, that he this was always the case, but more than ever, that he can fight at a UFC championship level pace.
Mm-hmm.
So, quick breakdown. I'm taking Kenny for that reason. Haven't seen him knocked out yet. I also recall, for example, his fight with Manny Bermudez, who is like huge and a big puncher, and he overwhelmed Casey a little. And Casey Kenny is just a dog, man. He does not get cowed by somebody having early success against him. In fact, it really convinces him that he needs to go. He's a fight back kind of fighter. Once you wake him up, he does not turn it back off. So yeah, I think he can stand up to power. I think he can somewhat replicate what Kyler Phillips did with taking advantage of the sort of straight line attacks of Song Yadong. And, yeah, I think he can like counter him and actually land some good, hard, clean shots too. Song Yadong has been very counterable.
Yeah, I do find myself wondering that Kenny has not fought punchers. Really.
It's true. Yep.
The biggest puncher he's fought is Nathaniel Wood, who is, you know, a decent puncher, but not really by modern bantamweight standards.
Again, I would say Bermudez, not a deep fighter at all, but certainly a big time punch and sub kind of finisher. He also fought Brandon Royval to a 5-round win pre-UFC, and Royval maybe not noted just for being a puncher, but also will hurt people and then submit them on the ground and is insane and wild. So
I think Royval is I think exactly the kind of fight where Kenny would be like, oh yeah, we both punch decently hard, we both have like good volume.
Sure.
But I'm happy to just, you know, have the same kind of fight that he had with Nathaniel Wood. I'm a little worried that he's just like, yeah, I'm just going to start exchanging people and then I'll win. And he'll try that with Song Yadong, and Song Yadong will rip his head off instantaneously.
Yeah, that could happen.
There are guys, as Wood himself found out, there are guys in the bantamweight division with which you just cannot play.
Yeah.
You cannot, like, strike for strike with your John Dodsons, your Cody Garbrandts, unless, you know, are yourself quite very durable and have a good chin. Your Pedro Munhoz, your John Linekers, and so on and so forth. There are guys who will just kill you.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned by that, but I will pick Kenny anyway.
Okay. Don't trust. Just I would love to see Song Yadong bring something new. You know, make a next step. but I'm not even entirely sure what that next step would be.
It's strange that he is with Alpha Male.
Isn't it?
Like, I wonder whether they have some kind of pipeline for picking up foreign fighters, because I remember when they picked up Teruto Ishihara and
they
then
have a lot of
didn't
Japanese
improve him
fighters
at all.
Yeah, they do. They get a lot of Japanese fighters. What wasn't I think no. Horiguchi wasn't ever at Alpha Male, was he? He was just ATT the whole time?
Yeah, I think he was just ATT.
Okay.
Well, he was, Crazy B and then ATT, obviously.
Right. Yeah, but they do seem to get a lot of Japanese fighters. They had Mishinori Tanaka. They had Ishihara. Now they have, Song Yadong is not Japanese, but they do seem to get...
Yeah, I was going to say.
Please forgive me. They do seem to get, I guess, Asian fighters. I don't know if that's too much a generalization, because as far as I know, Song Yadong is their first Chinese fighter. But that's not the first time. I don't know. Maybe it's just because they're like the little guy gym in the U.S. I don't know.
Yeah, and also just because, Shaw Faber's figured something out. He is a savvy and ruthless man.
That's true. All right. Well, no matter what happens, it's a very enticing matchup, as is basically the entirety of this main card. So much so that we just went ahead and straight up skipped Strickland Hall. If you want to hear us discuss that, in addition to some more of our discussion last week of the Dillashaw Sandhagen undercard, then you should find that on our Patreon. It will be up momentarily, and I hope you enjoy it. And that's it. Phil, anything coming out this week?
Yes, I believe there is, because I will be breaking down Luque Gane with David Castillo.
Nice. Should be a fun one, ripe for your sort of comic analytical take in those articles.
Yes.
As for me, I'm certainly going to try to write something after UFC 265. But if you haven't read it already, I did write a short sort of op-ed piece about Sean Strickland, who is just
which was excellent.
Oh, thank you. Who is just like it will, I think you may find it if you don't already know, revealing about Sean Strickland's personality and how I believe that informs his style and his success. He's just kind of an asshole, that Sean Strickland. And the piece is largely about how his style has been shaped by a tendency to, I think as I put it, bite off more than he can chew and then strive not to choke. Which has turned him into the fighter he is today, which is now officially pretty good, actual middleweight contender. You can find that and Phil's toe-to-toe previews on bloodyelbow.com. You can find us to yell at us about the opinions expressed in such articles on Twitter, namely at Evil Greg Jackson. That is Phil's handle. Mine is at Boxing Bush. And once again, check out the Patreon if you want to hear more about Hall Strickland and the Sandhagen Dillashaw undercard. Until next week, when we've got a gap, but I guess I can tease this now. I think we're going to have two men. Boy, I'm not going to try to say his last name. Chungus Khan from the fight site, who's just like a terrible man, and he wants to come on and talk to us about heavyweights. So we are taking next week with an empty weekend ahead of us as an opportunity to spin whatever happens in Luque Gane into a larger discussion about the okayification of the heavyweight division. So I hope you're looking forward to that. You will hear more from us then, and until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.
I feel sort of disappointed that we couldn't find some way to mix like the inevitable Yadong and two men jokes. Or like workshop that before next week.
If only Yadong had ever fought Albert Tumanov.
Yeah. If only they weren't 3 weight classes apart. Or is it?
Can Yadong beat Tumanov?
Yes.
There's so many opportunities for a man-child. God damn it. I wish people hadn't mentioned it, because I really thought I was over it in a very mature way. I felt like reliving the first moment in my life when I was able to look at a nude painting and not snicker.
Yep.
And now I'm back.
Boobs.
Now I'm laughing at classical boobs. There's no saving me. I'll never grow up.